Hello and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. It's the Saturday morning version. Dave and I are going to look back now over the two semi-finals, a quick look forward to the final, and then we'll do a normal Sunday night breakdown. Hopefully on Sunday. It might be Monday. We'll see. We'll see how things pan out tomorrow. But let's have a look back at the semi-finals. We'll do them in ties rather than in order of them being played. So we'll start with Leicester against Newcastle, and the first leg on Tuesday night, which finished 77-76, and Leicester just absolutely flew out of the blocks. That first quarter was their best scoring quarter for 9 years. They had a 16-1 run. The offense was purring. They ended up 36-18 in front and just in total control through 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was 10 minutes, but it was really 5 minutes. It was the first 5 minutes, I think it was 14-11 or something of that nature. Both teams were scoring a little bit too easily. But Leicester picked up the defense, and Newcastle's went to their usual rotations and brought Gordon out quite early, and I think Edwards out quite early. And when Maxwell and Fluger came into the game, kind of the dam burst. They weren't where they needed to be. They started turning the ball over, and I think probably 20 odd points in the last 5 minutes of the first quarter. And actually, Ian couldn't get Gordon back in the game because the flow of the game was there weren't any stoppages. So he sat down from about the 5 minute mark to about the 45-second mark of that run. And in that time, Leicester, as you say, they were purring, the ball was moving everywhere. They were getting every shot they could want. They were getting layups in transition, and they were knocking down 3-point jump shots. And it looked pretty awful for Newcastle at that point. You wondered whether it was going to be Leicester again, who just simply took over and blew them out. But the one thing about Leicester is that it's pretty rare this year that they've strung two high-scoring quarters together. They've started off hot, or they've got hot during the game, but they generally do cool off at some point. They haven't had that many games where they've scored 100 unless they've been absolute kind of shootouts with Manchester. And so that and the fact that it was an 8-quarter game gave Newcastle hope. And at that point, credit to them, they refocused their defense. And they didn't crack. It's always a bit earlier for it to crack in the first quarter. If that happens at the end of the third quarter, and it did to a certain degree, but not to the same, then you can crack. But they refocused their defense, and managed just to get enough scoring just to keep them in the tie.
Well, yeah, in the second quarter, it was the two you'd expect in that situation, really. Gordon and Fletcher getting the ball in the basket, more so Fletcher than Gordon, but that was probably Gordon's best scoring spell of that game. And Leicester started to miss some shots, as you say, and actually that was the high watermark for them in the tie. The next three quarters, they didn't get much more than 36 in the next three, and actually Newcastle got it back to 9 just before half time. So the fact that they'd chipped it down into single figures, even though it was 13 at the break, you felt like they were really back in the game.
Yeah, it was it's all about the defense. It's a defensively systematic way that they defended Leicester. Leicester, obviously a systematic team. Johnson didn't get going, which is a major key. If Corey Johnson gets going, the other guys are going to get their points because Lee's going to get his points in his spots. Crandall's going to get to the rim. Nelson Henry's going to finish at the rim to a certain degree, and without Johnson, that takes away 15 or 20 what you could put as bonus points. That often tips Leicester over the edge. So he hasn't got going against Newcastle probably the last 4 or 5 games. I'm not convinced that they were helped by Walker. No heart. I'm not suggesting he did anything wrong, and he was effective in relation to what he was able to provide. But it was such a change to play with Walker as opposed to Fraser, the way that they have been playing, that it just involves everybody else just recalibrating just a little bit. And
the other thing was Nelson Henry got into foul trouble, so they probably played Walker more than they would have.
He had 24 minutes in this game. Yeah, and that's probably more than he's played for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's hard. He did absolutely nothing wrong. He put his best foot forward. He was, he defended diligently, and he scored the ball when he could. But there is a temptation with Mo Walker, because his size is his advantage, whereas with Fraser it's his mobility, which is an advantage, just to kind of dump the ball down, and that can lead to a little bit more stagnancy in the offense. And I think that makes it easier to defend. Not that it doesn't mean you can stop him, but it means it's easier to defend everybody. And finally, Crandall, to me, both legs, but didn't appear to be right. I don't know if it was his hand. He had a bandage on his knee.
He had a knee problem he picked up in the Bristol game. I found out afterwards.
Yeah, he didn't have his general kind of ebullience, just his energy level, and he's kind of an energy point guard. He plays with that bounce, without that bounce, because he doesn't have the jump shot necessarily to fall back on the way that other guys do. He made a good job of it in this game. He made 3 of 5 from 3, but Newcastle would handle that. They'd be happy with that because it meant he wasn't getting in the paint and he wasn't creating for others. So with him not being getting the paint as much, with Nelson Henry struggling to stay on the court, that takes away a significant part of their offense, and that allowed Newcastle to stay close whilst they were pretty awful offensively, minus one individual.
Yeah, minus one individual indeed. So they got it back to 7 midway through the third quarter, but Leicester finished that period well, and they went into the fourth quarter, the healthy lead, got I think it was the Anderson 3, was it? Somebody scored at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and they were up 17 at that point, Leicester, with 9 minutes to play. And this is the thing. This is the cracking moment, isn't it? This is, you're either in the tie, you're out the tie. And Leicester got one score in the next 7 minutes, and Fletcher was just unplayable, really. I mean, he was just unbelievable. Couple of threes that got the juices flowing. Gordon hit one, and next thing you know, Eagles are in the lead. They could go 18-2, and they're 72-71 in ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It absolutely was the cracking point. I mean, what happened, it was the same again. The Eagles bench struggled. The beginning of the third quarter, they played basically blow for blow, and then again, as the Eagles rotated, they struggled to get any cohesive production out of the bench. And they came back with their starters at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And it was a cracking point. And it's a point where you need people who've been there before to stand up, to understand that, we've got 5 quarters left, but we got to make some plays now. And as you say, Fletcher had about 10 points in about 2.5 minutes. And they're not easy points. Leicester, it's not like Leicester are unaware of Ramon Fletcher. These teams have played each other 7 times and 8 times after the last game. And nobody else from Newcastle could throw it in the ocean. So, he eventually figured out, having kept them in it with 16 points in the first half, he didn't really notice. He must have looked at the end of the third quarter and thought, well, here I go again. And so he did it again. Yeah. And the advantage, the advantage that he has is when he has his 3-point shot going, he can literally score from anywhere. You give him the basketball, and that change in momentum, and struggled with, as I say, with Walker having to play more, with Rob not really being certain as to what Crandall was able to give him, which gives some uncertainty in relation to, do you play Washington more, or do you play Crandall with Washington, or do you play Washington on his own? Because all 3 of those combinations can work. Yeah, they can all work. They've all been shown to have worked. But which one is right for that game? If everybody's healthy, I think you'd know where we would want to go. But when there are little doubts about people, then maybe not. And ultimately, basically, the only reason I think that Newcastle didn't win the game was they got a little bit tired. Stopped throwing Fletcher the ball about 3 possessions in a row towards the end of the fourth quarter. I think Edwards threw the ball to Lee, and Lee dunked it on the break. Yeah. And you're thinking, just give the ball to the point guard. He's the only one who can make a play. And but even then, they down 5 with like a minute to go. Yeah. They got it back to 1. They did, and basically on the buzzer, and that's a big thing as well. Just Defoe just making that play on the buzzer. Just again, it impacts the way everybody feels about the game. But it's 2 more points. You know, 2 more points in the buzzer. Leicester score, Newcastle don't. It's a 5 or 7 point game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an interesting game, but it was a bit of a feeling out game as well. As I say, Leicester blew the chance to put it away, but Fletcher didn't let them, so they didn't really blow it. It was just basically a defensive game where one guy could score.
Yep. I mean, you pointed it out on Twitter. Fletcher was 14 of 21. The rest of his team was 11 for 47.
That's something I don't think it's ever happened in the playoffs before.
No, I looked it up and on your behest, and you know, it's happened 4 times or 5 times, whatever it was, in the last 12 years, and one of them was a 50-20 game. And the two of the others were teams that were struggling and only had one player who could score and were getting beat bigly. Beat well, but it doesn't happen very often. I think that's fair to say. So let's go on.
It's testament to his chops that, you know, it happens when it happens in the fourth quarter in a game like that.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. That's the separation factor with certain players.
Let's go on to the second leg then, and that one finished 69 to Leicester, 88 to Newcastle. So Eagles through comfortably in the end. This one started the other way round. Newcastle came out, excuse me, to the big start, led by 12. And the thing that I thought was huge for them in that first quarter is you've got Maxwell, who went 0 for 6 in the first game, scoring 7 points. You've got Edwards, who went 3 for 14 in the first game, scoring 7 points. And you've got Sayers, who went 1 for 6 in the first game, scoring 5 points. So right off the bat, they've got other guys contributing.
Yeah, and you got the interesting thing was the adjustments, because neither Johnson nor Sayers got going. And, you know, sometimes in the first leg, and sometimes the easiest thing is to take away the shooters. You know, as a coach, you know, you don't really want Louis Sayers getting open looks. You don't want Corey Johnson getting open looks. It's a relatively straightforward instruction. It's not necessarily straightforward to follow. But, you know, if you focus on that, then you emphasize that enough to your players, then they will know that they're in for a bit of a telling off if certain things happen, and that's one of them. So both coaches managed to get those guys going off curls early and getting them to the rim, you know, which is an adjustment in the game as to them saying, well, we can't just have you stand on the 3-point line because they're overplaying you out there. So we need to get you moving without the ball. So that got both Sayers and Johnson kind of going a little bit. You're absolutely right. The biggest play, or the biggest 2 minutes of the whole tie, was when the Eagles bench stayed out a bit longer this time because they were rolling, so they didn't come in at about the 3.5 minute mark. And again, it was Maxwell and I think Fluger. This time maybe for Sayers instead of Edwards. But first time down, they threw the ball down to Maxwell, and he managed to he basically established position on Walker. Walker fouled him before the shot. He turned around and he dunked it anyway. It didn't count, but he dunked it anyway. Statement of intent. The next play, they get the ball from the baseline on the inbound. Fletcher just throws it to Maxwell about 20 feet out on the baseline. He takes 2 dribbles, bullies Walker down in the post, gets under the rim, makes a layup. Now that's an intent that we haven't seen from Evan Maxwell since about November. You know, that is, you know, November. That was like, well, hang on a minute. Mo Walker is the biggest, most physical, hardest guy to move in the whole league. And he literally just moved them 6 feet under the basket and made a layup. The next time down, Edwards went to the rim. Maxwell out competed. Again, the big guy got a tip in on the offensive glass. And the next time down, he finished it off with some ball reversal. He nailed a 3. And he got 2 fouls, but those 7 points meant that his team knew that he was where he needed to be. In fact, more than that he was there. And the belief that brings to everybody else, hang on a minute, we got one of our main guys, one of our most talented guys, is there contributing, and is not going to take a backward step to, you know, Mo Walker, who is an intimidating player by nature. You know, he is. Everybody looks at Mo Walker and thinks he's big. Everybody. At the folder, everybody in the league does. And Maxwell is also big. And he didn't take a backward step. He actually went on the front foot. I thought that was massive. And that kind of blew Newcastle's lead out to about 12 at the end of the first quarter. And it was actually when he got his second foul that their offense kind of dried up just a little bit. But in little kind of vignettes of playoff games, playoff two-legged games, those little tiny individual matchups, whereby what you're going to get from one of the guys that you need, they're crucial because it just imbues everybody else with confidence. So that was, so credit to him. They needed them, and he doesn't need to give them. They're better with Defoe starting because Defoe settles everybody else defensively. He's probably the loudest player in the league defensively, talking. You can hear him on the court all the time. He settles Fletcher because Fletcher's played with him for so long, so they're better with that. But Maxwell can still give them he can give them 15 points in 18 minutes off the bench, and if he can do that, then they're a very tough team to beat. So that helped. But then Leicester aren't going away either.
No. And Mo Walker sort of dragged them back in a little
Yes.
bit at the start of the second quarter. And then just before halftime, Leicester had a 12-2 run to take the lead, 39-38. And you thought, oh, they've got themselves on an even keel here going into the locker room at halftime.
Well, you said it on the commentary, Fletcher came out with 6 minutes to go in the second quarter, and Newcastle were 0-5, and they weren't good looks. And you said after, I think the third one, you said, interesting to see how long he stays on the bench, and the answer was not much longer. And, again, 0-5, that might be 2.5, 3 minutes, but in a two-legged game, in a tight game, that's a big period of time, and that changes the momentum of the game. And basically, I think Newcastle scored 3 or 4 points in the last 6 minutes of the quarter. They weren't able to put the ball in the basket, and Leicester chipped away. They didn't come back with any particular runs, but they chipped away. They got some rebounding, and again, we were basically back to where we started at half time.
Yeah. So level on aggregate at half time, and then Eagles with a 9-0 run early in the third. Lee then hits 5 points to cut it back, but then the massive shift in the game, a 17-2 run for Newcastle to take them out to 69-51, and you're thinking they might have done enough right there. You know what I mean? It was one of those things, and actually Leicester didn't get more than 69 points in the game, so they probably had done enough by then. Yeah,
again, at the beginning of the third quarter, the Newcastle starting unit, and it's a relatively new starting unit, with Defoe in there. They only probably did it about 4 weeks ago. So they're still kind of working each other out as well to a certain degree. Their starting unit, again, impacted the game defensively. You also got to the point now whereby Leicester were missing shots. And that wasn't all Newcastle's defense. There was, they got some good looks. Not great looks.
But looks they knocked down.
Well, if Crandall's over 3 from the 3-point line, that's fine. Corey Johnson is, I think, over 5. William Lee is 1 of 6. Now, Lee's only a 28-29% 3-point shooter, but he tends to make the ones when you notice. Johnson's a better shooter than that. Heron never really got a foothold in the basketball game because Rob wasn't sure whether to go with his offense or go with Fletcher or go with Anderson's defense. And Heron basically just struggled to go. And they were very concerned about who's guarding Fletcher and Edwards, because and Heron, I don't think had been there long enough to earn that trust defensively, so he's limited to 14 minutes. So then you have the question as to where you're going to get your offense from. Connor missed a couple of open shots in that period of time, which Rob would probably hope that he would knock down. But fundamentally, this is kind of it's not the flaw in the Riders, but it was the makeup of the Riders throughout the season. They have 2 or 3 guys on the court at the beginning of the game. Nelson Henry, who's not shooting threes. Lee, who's at 28%. Crandall, who's at 27%. This is where they missed Jackson a lot, because Jackson was solid in knockdown shots when it mattered. Who aren't going to destroy you from the 3-point line. So if you can pack your defense and get your defense right to take away as much easy stuff as you can, and up until the fourth quarter, Newcastle played 7 quarters and really handled the Crandall Nelson Henry screen and roll quite well. Changed a bit in the fourth quarter, but they took that away. Then it comes down to those other guys making shots. And we saw it in you go back to the NBA, we saw it in the famous game where Houston missed 29 threes in a row against Golden State in the game 7 of the finals.
Yeah. When
you're under pressure, it's the shot makers that make shots. It's not the ones who shoot 29%, but might have a good game every so often. Connor missed a couple, and we'll get to that in a moment. but some of the other shots were they weren't really off ball movement. They were kind of standstill shots. And as Newcastle were able to basically handle the defensive boards, every one that you miss, the anxiety level goes up.
Yeah.
Amongst the players, when we're going to knock one down. Amongst the coach, when we're going to knock one down. You can't say, let's stop shooting them because they're good shots.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, we're not making threes, let's just go inside. Because there's a reason that you're getting those shots, because the opposition aren't letting you go inside. So you just got to hope at some point that someone's going to step up and knock them down. And they didn't in this game. And that was what let the run kind of snowball. And together with, Edwards and Fletcher, again, impacting the game at the other end.
You kind of mentioned the Nelson Henry in the pick and roll at the start of the fourth quarter, where Leicester got it back to 8 points with 7 minutes to go, which obviously is 7 points on aggregate. And then just as he did in the first game, Fletcher hits a big three. Sayers knocks one down in the corner. And that really was that.
It was a little bit, if I'm a Newcastle fan, and I probably just about was actually, it was a little bit more fraught than that, because Leicester got a couple of layups and Ian called a timeout. At that point, you mentioned it, just the rhythm of the game, 14-point game at that point. And they came up with timeout, and Leicester were rampant. Johnson got a layup, a curl to the middle. Nelson Henry got I think a putback or a layup. And Crandall maybe got one to the rim as well. And suddenly it was an 8-point game. And they're all over the court. Washington takes the ball. I think it was Washington takes the ball off Edwards at half court. About 6.5 minutes to go. And they have a 3-on-1 break. And the ball goes to Washington in the corner in that gym where he shot the ball 1,000 times to reduce the game to basically a 4-point game or a 3-point game on aggregate. Wide open, no one within 20 feet of him. It rattles in and out. Riders get the rebound, gets reversed out to Nelson Henry. Nelson Henry puts his shoulder down, drives at Gordon, bang, bang, 50-50 call. Charging foul. Momentum swing. Rob sits Nelson Henry down because it's his fourth foul. I think if you watch the way the game goes, he would probably not decide to probably have rolled the dice then. But obviously you got Mo Walker. And next time down, 23.5 seconds off the shot clock. Sayers finds Fletcher in the corner. Fletcher takes another half a second just to measure it up to wait until and Fletcher drains it. And the microcosm of the game is Connor Washington open in one corner, Ramon Fletcher open in the other corner, and that is just a blow which just takes the air, a shot which takes the air out of the gym. And the next time down, I think from memory, Gordon. It might be the one. Gordon blocked the ball from the weak side, or certainly got a stop, and Fletcher threw it to Sayers in the corner, and Sayers hadn't made a shot in 2 legs, nails one. It's a 14-point game, and from that point on, it wasn't actually a 20-point game in any way, shape, or form, because with 6 minutes to go, when Connor Washington is lining up that three, there's a 45% 3-point shoot in the corner to bring it to a one-shot game in the tie. That game is on. But sliding doors, it didn't go in. Ref called a charge instead of a block. Nelson Henry sits down. Fletcher makes a shot. Sayers makes another shot, and at that point, they didn't have another run in them. And I mean, they were impacted by Crandall couldn't be as good as he needed to be, or he wasn't as good as he needed to be, because in the two games, Fletcher was the best player on the court by a significant distance. And you don't, I know you mentioned about Crandall's league, that impacts them, and it also impacts the psyche of the team, because he's your leader, and if your leader can't quite give you everything, then you're looking where you're going to go next for the inspiration. And all year, Leicester have been a little bit like Crandall and the Crandettes, because everybody else plays off him. And that's not knocking everybody else. They all play their roles, and Rob's designed the system so they all maximize their roles. But a lot of it was he was kind of the conductor of the orchestra, and when he isn't able to conduct the way that he was doing, that means other players have to do a little bit more. They're a little bit out of their comfort zone, which means maybe the shots don't drop and the plays aren't quite made. So I just think they just ran out of steam at the end. They also had the issue of having played, meaningful games until the last day of the season.
Yeah.
And that is from experience, that is a debilitating situation. Newcastle had their feet up for the last 3 weeks of the season, figuratively. Fletcher didn't have to play in their last game. They were able to plan and focus entirely on the playoffs, whereas Leicester were grinding till the very end, and that can make a big difference as well. And one more thing, happily, no technicals in this game. There were 3 technicals in the first game for players talking to each other. I can take the technicals if players are disrespecting the ref, but if they're just talking to each other from 50 feet and they're not within basketball throwing distance of each other, don't take. If Crandall and Defoe are talking to each other 50 feet apart, well, they're the leaders of the teams. They're meant to, just let it go.
And I have to fess up to a mistake on TV. The technical that Adjudansky called was on Heron and not Rob Paternostre, as I said. And I apologise unreservedly to Rob because he got told off by his daughter, "What did you get a technical for?" And he didn't get a technical. It was on Heron.
Well, to be fair, you could see why he shouldn't have got one. Because it wasn't worth it, because your camera focused on it.
Yeah.
But you could see he made a very significant motion.
He did, that was what I saw. Yeah, I was looking at the pictures as my defense.
Yeah, and you had this when I was on the sideline. And it always confused me a little bit because the refs talked about visual dissent. So there were some refs who, if a player gets kind of hit on the arm in a shot and goes like that to them, that's an automatic technical. Right? And whereas, if the player kind of jumps up and down and waves their arms around or shouts a lot, it's not. And often it's just an instinctive reaction to the ref. I got hit. I think nobody is seeing that. Nobody's showing up there. But I would have been very surprised if Ed had teed up Rob from 50 feet away. I was surprised when he made the call. In fact, my immediate thought was that was a word that I wouldn't use in the podcast. Because he's talking to Steve Ferris, and Steve Ferris is stood next to him. If Steve Ferris isn't happy, Steve Ferris can call the technical. So that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, my mistake. And Fletcher with 27 and 10, and probably now I would say the second best Eagle in the playoffs behind Ali Garel.
In these,
throw that one out there. So let's go swiftly on to the other playoff semi-final. London Lions 80, Plymouth Raiders 92 in the first leg. Even start to this game, they were pretty much score for score. And then Plymouth at the end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter, had a 9-0 run to take the lead, and once they get up and the bench is making all that noise and they feel good about themselves, they look in a good flow.
Yeah, well, we've got some cut through in relation to this game.
Yeah, we'll get into Vince's rotations probably in a bit, but
a little bit. There's a couple of things first. London this year are just a lab. They're a lab experiment. We've never seen anything like it before. We've never had a situation in this league where you've had any teams had 16 players. We've never had a situation whereby they've had the degree of backing that they had, and they've used it in such a way. We've had lots of money in the league before. We've had teams who've had significant investment, but they've generally still only had 8 or 9 or 10 players. And as such, it's just, as I say, it's a chemistry lab of trying to figure things out every single day. And to a certain degree, it's impossible to comment from any of us because I've never been in that situation. I've had that many players to manage, never want to be in that situation. So Vince is very much like the Walter White of the BBL this year, and I think when you have that and you're cooking up whatever you're cooking up with your combinations, there's going to be some good batches and there's going to be some bad batches.
Yes.
And I think, to be absolutely fair to Vince, and this is obviously something which sticks in my craw, to be absolutely fair to Vince, if you're listening, it's not possible to know whether or not you're going to get a good batch or a bad batch because you've got so many guys. You've got to manage them and you've got to try and understand each and every one of them and where their role is. So that all said, London weren't ready for this game, the first game.
Robinson was.
Robinson was, yes.
Yeah,
Robinson was, beg your pardon. But as a group, they weren't ready. And the reason I think is because they'd blown Cheshire out by about 50 the week before, and that can bring in a little bit of, also they'd beaten Plymouth previously, and also it was a first leg. And that means that in the back of a player's mind, it's not all on the line. As a coach, you don't think they're always going to play like everything's on the line, but they were coming off a massive win against a team they'd beaten in the final, and it was a first leg. And Justin Robinson, just like he did in the first round, he knows. He's been there before. He's seen it all before, and he wants the playoffs because he didn't get the playoffs when they won the league, no question. And you're absolutely right. He was there. But the rest of them really weren't. They weren't locked in, and that then leads to Vince having to experiment and having to find guys who are finding combinations that are working and going big or going small, depending on. And the thing he has the advantage to go very big. He can go very small. He can put, if you did I did statistics at A level. And there was a way of calculating how many different combinations of players he could put on the court. 12 PCR5 or something like that. And I can't remember how you do it, but I'm pretty sure it would be larger for him than it would be for any other combination of players in the league. And
I think in this game he used most of the combinations as well.
And Plymouth, however, are different because Plymouth are actually under strength, but that brings about that degree of togetherness. And understanding of what they have to do. And, Plymouth basically played 7 players in this game. They didn't, Sentence hardly played, if at all. And they don't have Ubiara, they don't have Porter Bunton, they don't have eBay. Now that meant that,
I think they were also a little sort of chip on the shoulder, if you like, that eBay got into the all-defensive team, but nobody else did, and they felt somebody else, at least one other guy could. I mean, you're not going to get 3 guys in a 5-man team, but you always think, well, my guy ought to be in. And then ahead of the second leg, the team of the year came out, and they weren't best pleased about that either, I think.
The year is a year, though. I think that's the problem. If McGill is probably I'm thinking in the top 5 players of the league at this point, but he probably wasn't for the entire year. He didn't turn up till December. He didn't start playing until February. Hamilton is probably close.
My sense of it is I bet you they finished 6th and 7th in the voting because they took votes off each other.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Teams were only going to vote for one of the
other. Justin Gordon wasn't in the team of the year either. Justin Gordon's had a hell of a year and played in more big games, and his team was absolutely created when he wasn't there. So the problem with the team of the year with 5 guys is that you don't get any kind of positional feel as to who's beneath it, which is unfortunate, But anyway,
let's get back into the game. Let's get back into the game now. So it stayed about 6 through the second quarter, and then Plymouth scored the last couple of baskets of the first half, the first couple of baskets of the second half, and they are 14 up at that stage. And you're sort of going, oh, this is, if they can, even if they keep half of this would be good.
Well, they were scoring easily, and I'm afraid London's bench, Kevin Ware really struggled again. He hasn't basically been, since he got back, he hasn't been anything like the level that he was at. And he's a big player for them because when London put their bench in and when Robinson comes out, he tends to become quite ball dominant and quite shot dominant because he's the creator on the court. And he really struggled. He's putting if he's putting shots up, but they're not going in, then nobody else is shooting the basketball, and the other team is out on the run. So Plymouth were playing with a ferocity about them, and again, it was Beastie was defending Liggins in a particularly impressive way because Beastie has the length and just about the foot speed to stay with him, certainly over a 1-game series. And Dusha was allowing McGill to get into his scoring rhythm. The difficulty for Plymouth was the difficulty everybody always has with London is that they're always 3 stops and 3 3-pointers away from looking at the scoreboard and you thinking, what the heck have I done all that hard work for? But no, I thought Plymouth's approach to this game was impeccable, and they didn't have that. The reduction in their roster size, I think, helped them in the short term and hurt them in the long term.
So the end of the third quarter, Lions have been chipping away at it. Jules Dangakoda hits a three. It's a 3-point game, but Beastie makes one early in the fourth quarter to push it back to 9. And because of the physicality of the game, a lot of fouls called. And what that meant was a lot of free throws at both ends of the floor. But when you're in front, free throws just help you keep that scoreboard ticking over at a point at which late in the game, it can become harder if the other team steps up their defense.
Yeah, I thought London got the fourth quarter totally wrong. I thought the game was there for them at the end of the third quarter. And when I say they got the fourth quarter totally wrong, Justin Robinson got his fourth foul about 3 minutes gone in the third quarter. And he never came back in until 2 minutes in the game, which, I can get if it's a one-off game, if you want to keep him for the end, you may want to bring him a bit earlier, but that's up to you. That's what you choose. But it's not, you want your best players playing the most minutes, and Justin Robinson was playing extremely well, and you would want him in the kind of the 30, 31, 32 minute game bracket. He ended up playing 23 minutes with 4 fouls, didn't foul out. And in the first leg, where every possession is worth the same as every other possession, be it the last possession of the game or the possession in the middle of the third quarter, you have to get him back in quicker. If he fouls out, you bring the other guy in anyway. What changes? You give him the chance to impact the game. And I thought that was a difference. Then they went extremely small, and I think it was preordained, because I think they had the correct idea that Josh Ward-Hibbert was an excellent matchup for Will Neighbour, because he could physically deal with him on the post, but he could also chase him out to the 3-point line and defend him. And so Josh Ward-Hibbert ended up basically playing as a 5 because Parker didn't get back in the game either. And they had this lineup with Dangakodo, Spencer for a period of time, Williams, Liggins, and Ward-Hibbert. And unfortunately, they just couldn't rebound. And that gave, as well as the foul shots, which you mentioned, which are debilitating, that gave Plymouth second shots. And it also meant that they couldn't run, because you can't run if you're picking the ball out of your own basket. And despite all of that, and it obviously decided the way of playing this Plymouth team is to go small, and I've got no problem with that. That can work. But the advantage of going small for them is that they space the court. If you're going to do that, you probably need Parker and Robinson on the court, because they're your best 2 floor spacers. And they didn't have them on. So the game, even then, the game was close-ish with 2 minutes to go. And then they absolutely botched the last minute of the game as well.
Totally. Hamilton with the score. Liggins missed some free throws. McGill makes some free throws off of, I think it was an unnecessary foul. I can't remember. It's gone out of my head.
It was,
an unnecessary foul. And then...
it was a foul about 90 feet from the basket.
And it was just like, as you say, in an aggregate game, it was the complete opposite of what you need to do in the last minute. They
botched it, and then even then they had a 3 at the end, which they shot too early. I think it was Robinson shot it, and McGill comes down and drains a 3 on the buzzer, and what should be no more than a 7-point game and becomes a 12-point game. But to be fair, a 12-point game to that London team is a 6 or 7-point game to anybody else, and that's how it came to pass.
Liggins with probably the worst triple-double I've ever seen, if I'm honest with you. I mean, you could see in the interview at the end of the second game, he said how bad he was. And there's not many players can be that bad that they post a triple-double. But the stat of the game was, at the point at which he got his triple-double, which was from a free throw, he was shooting 9% from the floor. It was just bonkers.
He couldn't make a shot, but he is such an incredibly talented player in terms of our league, that he impacts the game in so many different ways. I think the key with him is his emotional equilibrium. And he said, and if he is emotionally level and leading his team, they become not impossible to beat, but very, very difficult to beat. If he lets external things, such as the fact it's a first leg, or the fact that he can't make a shot, impact him and impact his manner with his team, that can go the other way very quickly. And I thought he did a good, he was hard on himself, but he didn't shoot the ball well. But I thought he did a good job in this game of actually staying with it. Don't put down what happened in the game to him at all.
To be fair, he got the triple-double with 2 minutes to go, and he was shooting 9% from the floor, and he ended up 24% from the floor. So he made some shots at the end as well.
I thought, he showed we've seen in worse situations, we've seen, or in less worse situations, we've seen players just lose their heads, and we've seen it happen with him even, and he didn't, and I thought that was a really positive sign for London.
McGill 28, 7 and 7. Let's go on to the second leg. Lions 100, Plymouth 80, and 12 points going in has only happened twice in the history of two legs basketball, where the team has lost the first leg by 12 or more and come back to win the tie. But I said it on commentary before they got in front. So many times in these situations, the team from behind gets a lead, usually in the first half.
Yeah.
And it's the question is, can you sustain it? And this is exactly what we saw here. Robinson once again just right on it. I mean, just brilliant at the start of the game. He hits a couple of threes. Lions go on a 14-2 lead, and it took them 6 minutes and 15 seconds to get in front on the tie. They were 28-15 ahead and ahead on aggregate.
Yeah, and the difference in that London's starting five is great. London have, they have it, in BBL terms, they have it. With the way that Ali Hodzic has now cemented himself, and the shooting that they have with Liggins, Parker, Robinson, and Williams, and the athleticism and the length, it's as good a starting five as you're going to find who haven't played in this league for a while when they're all firing. And yeah, they came out and Justin again. This is the Fletcher thing again. These guys who have that extra level, who know when to go. It's having the extra level is one thing, but being able to deliver it is another thing. And he was able to do that. There's always an interest. You said it best in commentary. It's easier to win by 12 if it's 100 to 90 than it is if it's 70 to 60. That was absolutely probably the smartest thing you've said all season.
Thank you very much.
No, a lot of
it's a low bar. It's a low bar.
And that's absolutely right. And that's what happened, because in the first game, London was stymied. In the second game, London were putting it up. London played their own basketball. They were freewheeling. They shot the ball when they were open. They weren't running too many sets. They were attacking, and that's what they have to be, because that's what they are. And they get the speed of the game up, to get the possessions up, and to basically say, we're going to outshoot you, and we're going to wear you down. And that's exactly what they did. The twist was, in the first quarter, they were flying so hard. The decision as a coach is, how far do you ride them? Do you keep riding them because you're up 14? Do you want to keep going? Or at some point, you have to come with your reserves because they're going to burn out. And the key thing I always found in the second leg games, when we were down 10 or 11, or when you're up 10 or 11, is that you have to get the team that was ahead from the first leg into a situation whereby they are playing the two-legged game. So if you can get up to a point whereby you're up 10 or you're up 11, then as London and Plymouth are thinking, well, actually, we're still up by one, then you're winning, because they've forgotten about this game at the score in the real game. In the game, and so then you're winning, and you've kind of redrafted the boundaries of the parameters of the game that you're playing. So almost like that's all gone now. It's a tie game again, and that's a natural thing. That's what it does happen, and it's a weird situation as a coach, because you're thinking, we're down 9, but we're still up. So do I change? Do I dare change, or do I stay the same because we're still up, but we're down 9? If I was only down 9 in the game, I'd be doing something different.
Yeah.
So it really plays with your head a little bit. And they did that early, and they got up enough early whereby they could withstand Plymouth's run and still have a shot. Because if Plymouth had made the run they made in the second quarter in a tie game, the tie could have been over.
Yeah.
Because they got up early, it bought them some time. Now, London's bench at the end of the first quarter and the beginning of the second quarter was not good. They played the same way the starters did, but they weren't making shots. So Ware was missing shots. Ikenwin was missing shots. They were shooting their shots, which is right, because that's the way they were playing the game. But they scored 11 points in the second, 12 points in the second quarter, something like that. and they really struggled to get back into the rhythm. And Plymouth were able to dig their way back in on the back of their defense. And primarily, I credit to Mike Ocharobia, who when he was on the floor made a massive difference in the basketball game. Defensively, because they don't have eBay, they don't have Porter Bunton. It really is to play the way Plymouth have played all year, which is aggressive, athletic, physical, and then to have a third of your roster disappear. It's very difficult to sustain that over 2 games when you haven't got the players. You probably wouldn't be playing that way if you had that roster all season. But Ocharobia, Hamilton, and McGill and Moselle obviously have been consistent throughout. So they kind of made it close. And this was a close game going into 50 minutes to go. Plymouth was still up 12 on aggregate, I think, something like that.
Yeah. Well, they had a 15-5 run in the second quarter to cut it to 4, and they got it all the way back to 1 point early in the third quarter. That is the moment where, as a team, you can sort of go, oh wait, we spent 23 minutes and we had it all back, and now we've got to do it all over again. And do they have that thing in them? Which is why most of the time teams lose that second leg, even though they've got all the way
they get back and then they can't sustain it.
Yeah, exactly. But London then came. Dirk hit a 3, Liggins hit a 3, and they got it back out to 9. And as you say, they've got the iPad there with the actual aggregate score, so because the maths of it can be a bit confusing.
I don't think it's confusing, but I'm a nerd.
But you're yeah. You did statistics for A.
Yeah, I did statistics. Okay, I never really had a problem. My head coach kind of had a problem with it. So we're winning. Are we winning or are we losing? We're winning. Okay, all right, good. They had that, and then I think Williams banked in a 3, which was a kind of a lucky shot, which was a big turning point in the game. And Liggins made one in the corner. Obviously they had the whole Parker thing. They might have been better off having the iPad counting fouls.
Well, this is the moment of the game here, because Parker's fouled out. I think it was midway through the third quarter, and then with a minute to go in the third, Justin rolls his ankle, driving to the basket, and you could see immediately, even before we ran the replay, which looked terrible, you could see
high angle
that is not only his game done, but he's out of the final as well. There's no way he can recover from that. And the psyche on a team, when they were right there at that point, they were like 3 points behind on aggregate, maybe 4 because the free throws went in. But the psyche of, you've lost one of your starters through foul trouble, and now your talisman has gone out with an injury. It can go both ways from there.
Yeah, and that's where we come back to the beginning and the lab experiment. Because this is where ultimately Vince has to get his credit for having managed somehow to find minutes for all these guys during the course of the season, and to keep them attached to the program and keep them attached mentally to what was going on. Because suddenly Jordan Spencer,
it's a 3 at the start.
He must have went 3 or 4 weeks without even playing, and he hasn't played much over the past 2 years, Jordan Spencer. And he was at Leicester last year, but he didn't really play that much. He joined them in January with pandemic in March, wasn't playing a tremendous amount of minutes. Jordan Spencer, Jules Diacodo, Josh Ward-Hibbert, all those guys who at times haven't come in and played the last 5 minutes of a game and played 7 minutes in the whole game, all of that. Then suddenly it kind of becomes, and Shane Walker is the biggest one, because Shane Walker at one point was the third or the fourth choice centre. Now, because Parker goes out, Walker ends up playing significant minutes in this game, and he's playing a lot of those minutes as a 4 instead of a 5, because Ali Hodzic is on the court as well. And so rather than going small like they did in the first game, London stayed quite big, so they could basically batter Plymouth's tired bodies on the glass and keep getting up and down. And I think that was the smart move as well. And because the fourth quarter became a wearing down exercise, they didn't explode away from them. They just wore them down. They didn't make a ton of shots, actually, London, but they wore them down. And unfortunately, Plymouth's mental strength just dissipated towards the end, to the point whereby even when they were in the game, it was close, the decision making just died.
Yeah, that Spencer 3-put lines in front on aggregate. Liggins then scored 6 points for the Lions, which pushed it out to 17, so 5 on the aggregate. And then, as you say, for about 4 minutes or so, the scoreboard didn't tick that much, but it was always 15-16. So it was always 3 or 4
Plymouth
points.
missed. I think McGill missed 3 foul shots and Hamilton
Yeah.
missed a foul shot.
Yeah.
You know, and I looked at the score with 3 minutes to go, and it's a 4-point aggregate game, and they've just missed 4 foul shots.
Yeah.
You know, and that's fatigue. You know, these guys make foul shots. They're great players. You know, so it's fatigue. And McGill's playing all these minutes. Tuesday, Thursday, Hamilton's playing all these minutes and having to take a physical load because he's playing the 5 spot and the 4 spot. So those, and then from about the 3.5 minute mark to the minute 30, both teams were trying to lose. Because Ali Hodzic committed a ridiculous foul on the halfway line, stepping out on the screen to foul himself out with 3.5 minutes to go. Then Plymouth end up playing 2.5 minutes and 4 possessions where McGill doesn't touch the ball. So the Moselle gets it out of control, layup in transition, but she misses. Then Dusha turns the ball over in transition, trying to make a pass to the corner instead of making the aggressive play. And then London come down and miss again. Beastie makes a great play to defend at the rim. They get another stop. They come down to the other end. Dusha shoots a transition 3. Not the best shot. It wasn't in the corner or anything like that. That misses as well. And you get to you're still at a 4-point game with 1:20 to go. And then Hamilton commits a ridiculous foul at the halfway line when he's on 4 fouls. So it's a 4-point game with 1:20 to go, and he fouls himself out for it wasn't not making a play or anything like that. Just almost because you could almost see the players' brains almost becoming overloaded with the importance and the significance of what was going on, doubled with the aggregate score. So do they really are they actually certain as to what's going on? Possessions left in the game, points left in the game, that type of thing. And at that point, finally, the Fletcher of this game, which was Liggins, decides enough's enough and drains a 3 from the top of the key and makes it a 7-point game.
Dagger shot.
And that was it. And that was 2.5 minutes of crazy. You called it crazy basketball. You were right, but it was that Ant was right. It was the brains were switched off. And unfortunately, the ball wasn't in the hands of the people it needs to be in at the right time. And amazing what happened. Well, I think PJ calls a timeout after Liggins' 3, and immediately the ball's in McGill's hands. He has a layup within 5 seconds. And their missed possessions, not due to talent, not due to effort, not due to a little bit due to energy because it impacts your mind the amount that you've played, but more than anything due to composure and not having been there. So those fouls by Ali Hodzic and Hamilton, the missed possessions at both ends, the bad decisions at both ends, they are just the squeeze of pressure. The squeeze of the whole season being on the line. And it just takes the exceptional player in the game to break that. And once he breaks that, then they were never really close enough to get it to have a shot at it after that.
Minute 10 when he knocked down the 3, and as you say, that was.
He did the same in the trophy final, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Exactly the same. Top of the key. I think they had Ubiaro guarding him then, and they couldn't guard him at the end. So great credit to him. He was the difference maker in the game ultimately.
23 points, 4 of 5 from 3-point line. Nowhere near a triple double this time around, but just
I also thought they started him guarding McGill in this game.
Yeah.
They didn't start him guarding McGill in the last game. So it's not that takes him away from the paint, but it gives him the most important job on the team. So it may not be so reflected in the stats, but triple doubles are triple doubles, triple doubles, but the numbers sometimes don't reflect the impact on the game.
Well, he himself said he had a better game in the second one than he did in the first. So
and he's right.
He's right. Robinson 20-7 despite going down with that injury late in the third quarter, was probably the MVP of the game to that point.
Well, he's a champion. I mean, Justin Robinson's a champion. It's the thing, and people don't, I think, understand or maybe appreciate the professional, the way that he has handled this year, whereby suddenly he's gone from being the face of London to being maybe the third or the fourth guy on that team, and the way that he has conducted himself and and accepted that. It isn't easy, if you're out of sport and you don't understand kind of pecking orders and hierarchies and egos and that type of thing. All players have egos, and all players want to be able to give the best version of themselves on the court. And at times this year, he's not had the opportunity to do that. He's not been playing as many minutes. And for him to do what he's done in the playoffs up until this point is incredibly impressive, because his team has needed him, and there's been nothing from him coming out. There's been no stupid tweets. There's been no issues. There's been no drama. He's just a pro who has as much talent as anybody in this league, more than the vast majority of players, and shows it when it matters. So I'm gutted that he's not going to be playing in the final. Yeah. Genuinely, even though they're playing Newcastle, I am gutted that he's not playing in the final, because he's earned it.
Yeah, he has. Everybody scored for London, or everybody on the roster scored.
In the wheel, Vince.
There he goes. In the wheel. It's a very London statistic for you, though. 15 of 36 from 2, 15 of 33 from 3.
Good for them.
There is also 25 of 31 from the free throw line. 17 points off turnovers, which was important. McGill with 25.7 turnovers, and I think that was fatigue, because a few of them were like he just bounced it off his leg, or he lost the dribble, or whatever. But they didn't make enough shots, really, and they went to the free throw line a lot as well, Plymouth. But just all those minutes, I think, in the end caught up with them against
all those minutes in the short bench. Yeah, the short bench, they wore down. I think they had a great second part of the year. They've been the second best team probably in the league since February. But no, they've been one of the top 3 teams in the league since February, comfortably. But I think they started a bit late. They've been playing an import down. They played that game 2 imports down. We've only got 3 Americans. Porter Button was hurt. So, I look for significant investment from them next year. And, I expect them to be, if they can find somewhere to play, I expect them to be
Birmingham Raiders will be very good.
The Raiders.
Just a quick flick forward to tomorrow and the final. Obviously, it's intriguing because London without Robinson, Fletcher playing so well for Newcastle. I mean, the arc of the season has been about London, hasn't it?
The arc. I mean, Vince is right. London have played in every game in the season. That's an achievement. It's an unbelievable achievement. You played in every game in the season, and you are, on the face of it, they should win. And I don't say that to put pressure on them. Robinson evens things up a little bit, but then I think, well, look, am I counting against Fletcher in a final? Am I counting against Defoe in a final? I mean, Fletcher is 6-2 in finals, and he's been MVP in 4 of those games. He could have been the MVP in the other 2 that they won. And
he's never had a bad final, even the
never had a bad final. And you look at the London guys. They really haven't played many finals. But then again, you have the backdrop of what happened in the cup, and obviously the fact they had half a team, so they want to put that right as well. The Robinson thing will be interesting, because I anticipate Vince will probably start Spencer. That's what he's done in the past, and see if he can get into a flow in the game. And they play differently with him to with Robinson. So how London adjusts to that will be important. How Spencer is able to defend, not necessarily how he will. I think he'll knock down shots because he's a big game player. I think he will make plays, but how he's able to defend Fletcher and Edwards. Because he's probably going to have to guard one of them. They normally start with Dirk Williams on Fletcher. I think he's a little bit too nippy for Liggins. Liggins is just a bit too high off the ground to guard him, so they like to have Dirk Williams guarding him. And the other thing is, Orlando Parker. Is he going to play? Is he going to foul out? Because he's their X factor, and if Justin Gordon brings it like he normally does in big games, if he outplays Orlando Parker, then Newcastle have every chance, because he's the one guy that London, I think, struggle to be able to handle in the front court with his athleticism and his force, the way that he plays. So absolutely fascinating game. But it might just ultimately, though, for all we're talking about it, what did Rob say? You got to make shots. Yeah, you got to make shots. The numbers would suggest London are more likely to make shots than Newcastle. But that was the numbers with Justin. And who knows where London would have been in those two semi-final games if Justin hadn't played the way he had in the first quarter. So it's really it'll be intriguing. Of course, it's not as important as a women's game. So
no, indeed, indeed.
We want come on, the A's, Ali and Abby, come on, sick it to them, sock it to them. I can watch that more dispassionately because I don't know any of the players. You see, that's the advantage. I know some of the players for the Eagles, so I'm a little bit more.
London Newcastle in the WBBL as well, and Newcastle really is the romantic story. It's the one, if you've watched through the playoffs, that I think most neutrals will be rooting for. But that London team is
stacked.
Pretty stacked, pretty good. And Kennedy Leonard is worth, if we could buy a ticket, worth the admission price on her own.
Absolutely. I think they've been, it's the only team Newcastle haven't beaten, I think.
It is. Yeah.
It'll be intriguing. No, but it's great. I'll be delighted to, put my feet up, crack open a can of Diet Pepsi, and ignore the family for an afternoon. Great.
For the last afternoon of the season.
They are kind of used to it now. To be fair.
They won't know what to do with you next weekend. Right. Well, it's been a really intriguing season. There's been so much excitement and drama against the backdrop of empty seats. Unfortunately, just hopefully we get two really good finals to sign it off in style, because I think that's kind of what the season deserves. It's been that good. Dave and I will watch the finals. I'll obviously be working. And we will put this together again. We will see if we can do it Sunday night. If not, it might come Monday, but we'll do our best to get it out as quickly as possible. But for now, enjoy the finals, and we'll see you on the other side of those. Goodbye.